Welcome to our posts. Today we will see stories of r/malicious compliance. You will address me by my new name. I once worked for the second most toxic man I have ever known. This was a small business of him, the owner, myself, and my long-suffering colleague. So he was in complete control with no one to report to. My boss was an absolute manchild who would launch into hours-long absolute fits of pants-soiling fury over the smallest inconvenience, and then as soon as his problem was solved would act frustrated and sulky that we weren't all celebrating his victory. He would have these tantrums several times a week. Our shop was on a high street. I felt bad for our business neighbors having to put up with it. It's only now, years later, I remember we had student flats above us as well. When my boss wasn't risking detonating his own nads into a fine red mist of rage, he was otherwise insufferable. He would also frequently get hyper and giddy and make fun of us, lost in a fit of giggles while calling us nonces. Or he would decide that some new form of honors should be bestowed on him, like we should be made to call him Sir, or Master, or Darth. Seriously, imagine a man that has never in his life held a stick or pole without swinging it around making lightsaber noises. One day he decides we are to call him Daddy Cool. We argue and resist and oh for F's sake at him, but he is insistent that we are to all refer to him henceforth as Daddy Cool. I step away from the insanity to take my lunch in the basement. I chill a little and my own anger settles to weary resignation. Dangerous, perilous, weary resignation. I climb the steps from the basement. I burst through the door and bellow in my stage voice, Daddy Cool. Customers are in the shop being tended to by my boss. I ignore them. My colleague crumples into hysterics, gasping OMG between breaths. We have run out of XYZ, Daddy Cool. We should order some of UVW, also, Daddy Cool. I address him as Daddy Cool for days until he's like, okay, alright, that's enough. Actually, no, I continue to refer to him as Daddy Cool well beyond him begging me to stop. And several more times as necessary over the years when a reminder is necessary. Next story. Malicious compliance to malicious compliance. I run a repair shop where I employ a bunch of local kids, ages 16 plus, to learn skills and make some money while we generally sit around and talk about the world while we fix things. We had a client come in with a busted electronic. We fixed it up for her and gave her a decent discount on the work. Her final bill for parts and 4 hours of labor was $100 even, discounted down from $220. She didn't like the bill. She didn't like the work. She claimed that we'd broken something else. She claimed that the kid who did the work didn't know what she was doing. She did, and I had supervised her, and that the kid who helped her in the front room was rude to her. He wasn't, but she didn't like the little pride flag pin he was wearing. She demanded to see the manager, so I popped out, listened to her tear into my kids, validated how she was feeling, but pointed out that the work she had asked for was done correctly, and her bill was due on pickup of the piece. The last straw for her came when she pulled out a credit card and I had to inform her that we don't accept that particular card. She literally asked me, "Do you know who I am?" Which I didn't, still don't care, and I told her we'd take a personal check. She wrote out a check, problem solved. I deposited the day's checks and got a note from my bank that one had bounced. Her check, of course. I called her the next day to inform her that her check had been returned for insufficient funds, and that she'd need to come in and pay her bill, plus the extra fee for a return check. All of these fees, just to point this out, were clearly outlined on the service agreement she'd signed, and we'd already discounted her $120, just to be nice. Anyway, she rolls up into the office carrying a bag, and I knew exactly what was going on. She drops, of course, a bag of pennies on the front desk. She's breathing heavily. We're on the second floor and she'd taken the stairs, and she announces triumphantly that she's here to pay her bill. She just needs to go get the rest of our hard-earned money, said with a sneer, of course. The kid at the front desk looks like he's about to cry, so I stop working on the thing I'm working on and take over. "How many more bags do you have?" I ask her, and she says that the nice people at the bank loaded them up in her car. She didn't count them. I told her that was fine, we'd wait for her to bring them all up and then settle up her bill. She was expecting a bigger reaction. I think either that or she hadn't thought this through. 10,000 pennies, plus the extra $25, weighs a lot. And she'd just committed to carrying them through a parking lot and up a flight of stairs. One of my kids, bless his heart, offered to help her carry them. She refused. Finally, shaking and sweaty, she deposited the last of the bags on the countertop. The pennies were loose, not in coin rolls. She'd done some work to prove her point. What she hadn't counted on was that we'd need to count the pennies. While the other kids took care of other clients and fixed things in the back, the front desk guy and I counted up the pennies. She started to realize that this was going to take a while and tried to leave. I told her that she couldn't leave until we'd signed off on her bill, since at this point she was in violation of her service agreement and had passed a bad check. We couldn't just take her word for it, and I would inform our local constabulary if she left without paying. I was kinda talking out of my butt, but she'd managed to tick me off a little. The other clients in the shop came and went, and we counted. Phone calls came in and were handled by my kids, and we counted. She sat down in a chair, folding steel, not super comfortable, stood up again, walked around the office, and we counted. After a while, she said just forget it, and took out $125 in bills. We signed off on her agreement and she started to leave. Another one of my kids, bless his heart, asked her if she wanted help carrying the pennies back to her car. She looked at all of us with a face of sheer panic, mumbled, "No, thank you, just keep them," and bolted. The whole shop was silent for a moment. Then one of the kids started giggling, and nobody could stop. People coming in thought we'd gone nuts, and I finally had to banish everybody to the back room until they could breathe again. We loaded the bags into my vehicle. We used the elevator she'd walked by a few times, took them to the bank and used the coin machine to deposit them, then wrote out a donation to our local shelter for the amount she dropped off. She posted something nasty on Facebook about it and got ratioed. She had, of course, posted earlier about what she was going to do, and she got called out with her own post. My favorite response was something like, "You said you were going to pay your bill in pennies. You paid your bill in pennies, what went wrong?" Please don't pay your bills in pennies, folks. Especially if you're just doing it to be a stupid. Next story. At-will employment cuts both ways, sister. A few years ago, my husband was laid off at the start of summer. I had a part-time gig as a teacher, but it didn't come with benefits. I had to take a job, any job, to provide health insurance, Morca, while hubby looked for a new gig. I got a job as a teller at a bank. I tried, but was new to keeping a till, so a few times a week, my register wouldn't balance. Never very much money, under a few dollars. But the whole staff had to stay late until we straightened it out. I felt horrible for the rest of the staff. As if that shame wasn't bad enough, my supervisor, Mel, would remind me that I worked at will and they could fire me at any time. Our family's health insurance going up in smoke was terrifying to me. Sometimes it was hard to hold back tears. I got better as the summer went on, but every few weeks, if I would make a mistake, Mel would smile as she warned me that you can be fired for no cause and you'd have to leave immediately. It was so fantastically over the top. At one point, I pointed out that constant threats didn't create a healthy environment. Her smile only broadened. It goes both ways. You can quit at any time, you know. When the school year started in the fall, I needed to take my daughter to tour her new school for her first day. I asked to take my lunch in the afternoon so I could help my daughter. Though they approved it, when it came time for my lunch, they insisted I work through my lunch because they were being slammed. By then, Hubs had found a job with insurance and, even better, I'd been offered more hours teaching, though still not full-time. It was enough. The next day, I practically floated into the bank. I waited until 10 a.m., then told Mel I needed to talk with her. She replied that she was very busy and it would have to wait until after we closed. "Oh, I won't be here then," I said. She looked like I'd smacked her with a brick. "What?" I smiled. "Remember that I needed to bring my daughter to her new school yesterday? You wouldn't let me do that, so I'm doing it this afternoon." She didn't get it at all. "You can't just take an hour off when you," I had to interrupt. "I'm not taking an hour off. I'm leaving. For good. At noon. You kept reminding me that I work at will. Thanks for those reminders. I'm leaving for good in 2 hours." While Mel fumed, I waited on customers. I practically sang my greetings to them and was so effing cheerful, customers kept asking me why I was so happy. I was delighted to tell them, because I'm leaving forever at noon. After a half hour of that, Mel thought I should just go right away. And I did. I effing skipped right out the door, then gave Mel a very elaborate curtsy at the door. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share and subscribe the channel or posts.